The drum mix can make or break a track. Listen to this track with one kit. And now listen to the exact same track with a different kit. It makes such a huge difference. Nothing changed except the drums, but drums are hard to mix. There are so many different parts, it's like trying to juggle multiple things at once. So if you feel overwhelmed with drum mixing, keep watching, because in this video you will learn how to mix drums like a pro in just 4 simple quick steps using stock plugins in your DAW. By the end of this video, you'll feel confident mixing drums and your mixes will instantly sound more professional. But first, be sure to grab the free cheat sheet that I put together that will help you to get the drums right every single time. There's a link in the description or on the screen now. Okay, let's dive right in. So, when you're mixing drums, all you need to remember is the BASK technique. B-A-S-K. And that stands for balance, aux, snare, kick. B-A-S-K. Just remember that. Now, these are those 4 steps that you need to remember. And if you go through these steps in order, whether you're mixing live drums or you're mixing samples or easy drummer, it doesn't matter. Go through these in order and your drums are going to sound awesome. So it starts with step 1, B, for balance. So we're going to go back to that same track, but everything's been reset. The balance on the drums has been reset. There's no processing on the kick or on the snare. And there is no processing on the drum bus apart from some gain, and we've got a tiny bit of reverb on that snare and the overheads as well. So let's just have a listen to the drums in solo now. So before we even start thinking about the balance, first of all, you need to actually send everything to a bus. So we can see here I've got most of my drums going to bus 5, which is this drum bus here, bus 5. I've got the snare and the kick going to their own little aux channels here, so I'm merging the snare top and the snare bottom into 12 so that I can process them together. And the kick is also going to its own channel just so I can have that next to the snare and combine the kick in, which is here, with the kick out, which is here. So you can see 11, 11. So set up all your routing and then check your gain. Already it sounds like we've got some issues with gain. Some of those sounded quite hot. Cool, so because we set the faders back to 0, I was really pushing that limiter on the mix bus. So now we're all good to go. So first step of the BASK technique is balance. So I'm just going to go through and balance these one by one. Now the approach I like to take with drums is to first drop everything to 0, and then we're going to bring things in one by one in order of importance. So normally the kick or the snare is the most important. If you're mixing something like hip hop or a lot of electronic music, then maybe the kick is more important. If you're mixing something like this, rock music, then maybe the snare is most important. That's up to you. There's no right answer. Just try starting with the most important thing. Here I'm going to start with the snare. So let's just bring that up. I'm going to do all of this with the drum bus solo for now. So we set that to 0, and then we can start bringing in everything else one by one in order of importance. So I'll get the snare bottom going, then the kick, and then bring everything else in. So I'm going to ignore these ambience tracks for now. These are just added by Easy Drummer and we don't really need them. I've got my own reverb going on, just this bus here, which is Valhalla Room. So I don't really need the ambient track. We can try bringing that in the mix. But now let's actually unsolo this drum bus to get the balance in the context of the mix. Now that we've got a rough balance within the drum kit itself, we need to make the rest of the decisions in the context of the whole mix. So that's a good rough balance to get started with. Normally I recommend you spend much longer on that step, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to move on now. So the next step in the BASK technique is A for AUX. We've already set up our routing, and that helped us to set the drum level in the mix there. As you could see, I was adjusting that. But now we want to start processing on the AUX. So before we focus on the kick, the snare, and maybe the overheads and the toms, we can do some mixing on the drum bus itself, do some big broad sweeps here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just see if there's any issues. Have a listen, focus on the tone, see if we need to make the drum sound a bit less muddy, sound brighter, or any other issues we might want to solve now on the drum bus. Let's check against some references. So I think the whole kit sounds a bit muddy and it could sound a bit brighter. So we can just load up some EQ. Nothing fancy, we're just going to try and remove some of that muddiness. Try and maybe adding a bit more brightness here with a shelf. Okay, so I think that's all we can do. We don't want to do anything too aggressive here, just kind of nudge it in the right direction, because now the snare needs some work, the kick needs some work, but we're going to have to do that on the channels themselves. So then what else can we do on the AUX? Well, I pretty much always use some form of parallel compression on drums, especially when it comes to rock tracks. So let's just grab something like this. And ideally, the best way to do this is with a compressor that has a mix knob. So I'm just going to use this. It doesn't matter what compressor you use. All that matters is it's got a mix knob. Something like this, an 1176 emulator works well, but honestly, it really doesn't matter. Just having that mix knob makes it so much easier, because otherwise you'd have to create a new AUX and use the sends to get some of the signal from the drums there and then add compression, balance it in, etc, etc. Whereas here, we can just dial in some nice compression on the drum kit and then just play around with this mix knob. And what we're doing then is tucking a compressed version of the drums underneath. So let's start with the mix at full and a high ratio, and let's just play around with the settings a bit. Probably going to want medium attack and release, and not too much, maybe 5 to 10 dB of gain reduction. Depends how aggressive you want to be. You can be really aggressive because we're going to tuck it in underneath. So let's just play around with this a bit. We just want to make it sound really aggressive and punchy, and then we're going to dial it back. So I think that's a good start. Now we can just drop this to 0, so we've got the uncompressed version, and we can start to bring this in until we start to notice some more punchiness, some more aggression in the drum kit. Now we need to be careful here because it's definitely increasing the volume. So we want to add a trim control or a gain, something afterwards, so that we can drop that a bit, so that we can actually compare without being influenced by the fact that it's increasing volume. So let's just adjust this, bypass it a few times until we've got the same volume. So there we go. I really like what that's doing tonally as well. It's opening up the drum kit. It sounds like it's dropping those mids a bit and bringing out the top end and that low end and giving it a bit of a scoop sound, but I quite like that. So we're going to roll with this. And the other thing we could do on the aux now is add some saturation. Great free plugin for this is Klanghelm IVGI. And we're just going to experiment with this. I think it needs, because we're using EG drummer here, it needs a bit more excitement in that top end. So we can actually add warmth by adding saturation with this like low frequency section, or we can add brightness and excitement by adding more high frequency. So it's probably going to be around here. Let's play around with this a bit. So what I like to do with these saturators is dial in quite a lot of saturation so you can get the tone right and then back that off. So down there it sounds a bit warmer. Up there it sounds brighter, and I really like it all the way to the right there. So now let's just dial this back. So now we're just adding more excitement to the drums, and you can do a lot on that aux bus. Let's solo this and compare before and afterwards. And with that processing. So it's not too dramatic, but we're adding more punch, more aggression. Tonally, we've opened up the kit a bit more. Let's compare to our references now. So yeah, I think that was a big step in the right direction. So we're done with step 2, aux. Now, BASK technique, step 3, BAS, we're going to be working on the snare. We've got a good balance, we've got a good overall sound on the whole drum kit, we've done some big broad sweeps, and now it's time to focus on the smaller details. And let's start with the snare. So we're going to do this with intention. We're not just going to start playing around with EQ and compression. Let's again skip through those references, and what I want you to focus on is tonally. Let's start with that. Where does the snare need to go? Does it sound good the way it is? Could it be brighter? Does it sound a bit muddy? Is it lacking body? Comparing it to references to just kind of get a reference point to where we might need to take this. So to me, it sounds like we need a lot more aggression and a bit less body. This snare sounds it has a bit too much body, not enough crack to it. And sometimes that'd work in a lot of contexts. Maybe we want a snare with lots of body, but here in this track, I want to give it more aggression in that upper mid range. So let's start with some EQ. And first of all, we're just going to get rid of some of that low end because we don't really need it. I'm going to bring this snare up so you can hear what we're doing easier. I'm not going to solo it because we want to do this in the context of the mix. But what I noticed there was just bringing in that high pass filter already removed some of that body and opened up some of that top end. Not bad. So now let's just see if we need to get out the way of the vocal a bit. At this point in the song, it's not an issue, but let's go to another part. Leaves on the ground, no difference, no shame. Have you ever seen me cry on a winter? So that is fighting the vocal a bit, and we boosted the vocal at 1K, so we could say that that range is allocated to the vocal. So we could try just dipping it at 1K a bit. Leaves on the ground, no difference, no shame. Have you ever seen me cry on a winter's day? Nature is nature does, but we'll live through from the... So that's working quite well. I'm just going to see what's going on with the guitars as well. So we're also cutting them around 500, and let's see here what's going on. That one's been cut there. So I'm just looking for any potential issues because of going back to this mix after quite a while. Areas that have already been taken up by other instruments. Now we can use our ears for this, but it's much easier to just take a look at what you've boosted elsewhere. So probably want to avoid 5K. Looks like we're boosting that on all of the guitars. So that's an obvious area to avoid. And then here as well on these guitars, I'm dipping them quite aggressively around 1K as well to get them out of the way of that vocal, so we probably want to do the same on the snare. So now that we've done that, we've addressed the main issue of brightness, and we've got the snare out of the way of the vocal a bit. Let's see what else it needs. So I still want to give it a bit more aggression in the upper mids. We want to avoid 5K because that's what boosting the guitars. It sounds quite nice here around 9K. High shelf didn't quite work. I just want to boost these mids. And this is really kind of getting into that area of treble now. Now let's try some saturation, again, just to bring out that top end a bit more. So we're going to go back to our favorite IVGI, and even more saturation on the snare, again, probably high. So that's good. I don't feel like we need to be as aggressive with that boost now, so we can back that off a bit. And now tonally, I'm happy. We've done enough to just kind of push it in the right direction. We don't want to go over the top with it. So now let's add some compression. And I'm going to use that same Slate Digital compressor. So let's just grab that. And we want to be pretty aggressive with this. So I'm going to go for probably around 10 dB at least. And quite a high ratio just to get a sound that's really punchy, aggressive, and to make the snare really consistent in the mix. So let's try bringing that down a bit. I'm not sure we need it because it's easy drummer. It's already very consistent. So more, we're just trying to add some punch to it. But let's see if it's necessary or not. So we'll get the snare back down to where it was and play around with this a bit more. That's definitely adding some excitement to the snare and helping it to cut through a bit more. So I'm happy with that. Now, in terms of reverb, I normally add a tiny bit of reverb on the overheads and on the snare as well. So this is without reverb. And this is with. Have you ever seen me cry on a winter's day? Nature is nature does, but will dig down and bring it up to show. So I'm happy with that. It's just the normal room. I set this up right at the beginning of the mix, and this is what I'm using to create depth in the mix. It's just one room reverb and sending everything by varying amounts to create that depth. Now, normally the snare needs reverb on it and maybe on the overheads, and that's pretty much it. So now we can move on to the last part of the BASK technique, which is kick. So BASK for kick. And we're going to follow that same process. Tonally, what does it need? And then do we need some compression to increase that punchiness and give it a bit more weight? Let's have a listen. So in terms of the balance, in the Radiohead track, it's pretty quiet. So is the snare actually, whereas in this Hardfire track, right front and center, I want to be kind of somewhere between the two. I really like the modern sound on the kit in this Hardfire track. That's why I use it as a reference. It's got quite a saturated, in-your-face drum sound, whereas that Radiohead track is a bit more of a kind of classic rock sound. So let's go for somewhere between the two. So I think the kick could probably come out a lot in terms of like the punchiness and add in more beta. So we're going to definitely want to do that tonally. And also we want to compare it to the bass. It's probably fighting the bass for some space. So we want to make sure we're not trying to put it in the same area. So the bass in this track has got a very aggressive, distorted upper mid-range sound. We're cutting everything below 70 Hertz, so that means we've got lots of room down there for the kick. So in terms of the low end area of the kick drum, I don't want to be boosting it around 100 or anything like that. In fact, we can probably figure out where the bass is sitting and then try and make sure we don't boost that same area. So the bass has got loads of energy around 150. So let's just dip that a bit in the kick to make some more room for the bass. And we're going to add a high pass filter, just 30 Hertz to just tidy up that low end a bit and really make it sound tight. And then we can just dial in some of that beta that we want. So you can hear the different qualities of beta. Down here we've got more of a kind of click sound. Up here we've got a bit more of an aggressive sound. And in the context of the mix, I think we're probably going to want to boost it around here. It just kind of sat better. Really like how it sounds around there, but I know the guitars are in that space, so let's find somewhere around there. So I don't think there's anything else really sitting around 7.5, so let's compare that. So we've got that nice low end here around 50. We're then removing some of that kind of muddiness and that kind of foggy low end, I would describe it as, around 150, which is also making room for that bass, which opens up this top end quite a bit anyway, and then we're just giving it a bit of a helping hand here at 7.5K to help that beta come out. So tonally, I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think it necessarily needs saturation to stick out. We'll come back to that idea when we drop the fader back down, but for now, let's go and get some compression. I'm just going to use the stock Logic compressor this time. So again, probably high ratio, quite a lot of compression. Just see if we can do anything interesting tonally to make it cut through the mix a bit more. So because we've got a slow attack time there, 8.5, even though it's on this end of the scale, that's still very slow for drums. So I think that's bringing out that beta quite a bit, and I like that. So we're just going to play around with the knee now. Yep, hard knee works better. And that's it. I'm just going to roll with that. So let's flick through some of these to find one that sounds good. I like the tone of that. FET always works well with drums, so we're just going to stick to that. And now I'm just going to set that level again. So just focus on the level of kick drum in these references. Cool, so at this point I don't think it needs any saturation, it's cutting through quite well. Could check the mix on small speakers, check it on Apple headphones, an iPhone speaker, stuff like that to see if it gets lost. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, it doesn't play a key part in the song, so I'm happy with that. And now we're pretty much done. After you've followed those 4 steps, BASK, balance, aux, snare, kick, you then just want to go through and do any final touches. So things like adding a bit of reverb to the overheads. Maybe we can clean up the sound by adding some high pass filtering to the overheads as well to get rid of that low end. Maybe you want to add some processing on the toms. The toms don't play a key role in this song, so I'm not really doing anything, but if there are toms in your track and they're important, then you're probably going to want to go through and spend quite a bit of time on those as well to make them sound really fat and in your face, especially if they're important. Again, with hi-hat, might need some high pass filtering. Because we're working with Easy Drummer here, it's not really necessary. Everything sounds clean and professional already. We don't have to work as hard. And of course, besides this, you'll probably need gating if you're working with acoustic drums. That's not too hard to do. Just make sure you set a gate on your kick and snare and make sure it's working properly so that then you can add plenty of processing to your snare and to your kick without affecting the hi-hat and anything else that's bleeding through. So that's pretty much it. Go through that BASK technique. You're always going to want to balance. You're probably going to want some processing on the aux, and you're probably going to want some processing on the snare and the kick. But in a lot of cases, that's all you need. So make sure with anything else you do, you have an intention first. You're not just doing it for the sake of it. So there you go, the simple 4-step technique for mixing drums. And if you want to learn how to mix drums, just go through the motions here, go through that process, and then think about anything else you need to add. We covered a lot here, and we could go a lot deeper into the individual elements like the kick and the snare. And these things are really important. If you want your drums to sound professional, you need to get every element right because they're all working together. And that's why I put together a free drum mixing cheat sheet that you can use when you're mixing to make sure you get the drums right every single time. And when you get the drums right, the whole mix will sound better. So it's completely free. Head to the link in the description below or click the link you see on screen now to go and grab that drum mixing cheat sheet. That's all from me. I'll see you same time, same place next week. And remember, create regardless.